Well, here we go. It is 1 o'clock according to my computer and my phone, and I'm glad as many of you have joined as there are. It's fantastic. We had a huge bunch of people register for this event. We met our quota, which was just around 1,000, and we'll see how many people actually join. We expect it'll be somewhere around half to 2/3 of that amount, but we're super glad to have you. Welcome to our North America World Fish Migration Day event called the Rivers Full of Fish webinar, a real simple self-explanatory name. It's our goal to have rivers full of fish like they were meant to be. So we've got a great agenda for today. It is, let me just go through it quickly here. It starts with, of course, this introduction. I am Josh Roy with the Nature Conservancy. I'll introduce the Nature Conservancy in just a second. But we've got a great lineup with Darius Coombs from Plymouth Plantation, the Wampanoag Mashpee tribal member and director of their Wampanoag and Eastern Woodland group there. John Waldman from Queens College will talk about the decline of sea run fish. Bob Irvine, the CEO of American Rivers, will talk about his history and American Rivers' history of dam removal in this country. Lynn Scarlett, our Director of Government Relations, will be up after that to talk about policy and transformational change. George Pess from NOAA about ecosystem response. David Gould from our very local, project that we meant to be at. We wanted you all to be at Plymouth, is how this all started, and clearly didn't work out the way we thought for an in-person event. So we are here in a webinar. After that, Carrie Selberg will talk about our national perspectives and successes, and Herman Monahan, the Executive Director of the World Fish Migration Foundation, will follow after that. So really neat lineup. I'm very excited about it. I'm looking forward to hearing these presentations today. I hope you are too, and continue to put your messages in the chat box. There's also questions and answer, which Molly Payne-Wynn will be monitoring over the course of the day. We'll ask for questions after each of the presentations. So I'm Josh Roy. Here's the rest of the committee, as mentioned, from NOAA, TNC, the Town of Plymouth, and the World Fish Migration Foundation. We also have other support from folks at the foundation and also donors. So these cartoons, which many of you have seen from World Fish Migration Foundation over the years, are by an amazing cartoonist, Seppo, from Finland. We also have financial support from MMI, as well as videos. And all of this has been organized and orchestrated by Meg Gauscher from Sweet Squeeze Events. So we thank Meg in the background for all she's done to lead us through this process and create a lot of the graphics and certainly the schedule that you all got to see in the invite. So let me tell you a little bit about the Nature Conservancy. We're a global nonprofit, non-governmental organization, and here's our mission: to conserve the lands and waters on all which all life depends. And we do this through major strategies around climate change, but also for protecting and restoring lands, fresh water, and the ocean. So we're all around the world, which makes it handy to work on global problems. There's still a lot of blank spaces on the map that I imagine over time, as we find opportunities there, we'll engage in more and more places as we have. So about 72 countries right now. I've heard 74 perhaps. A lot of employees and a lot of these projects around the world involve freshwater and restoring connections to the ocean. My connection with the stream restoration work began with the Penobscot River Restoration Project, which for most of its 180-year history was not passing fish. And you can see that just the bottom of the basin had access to fish. So what's exciting is that we went from not just protecting land around rivers and stream buffers, but actually looking to connectivity up and downstream for all the fish and all the species that move up and down these rivers. So this is what sort of the before after. I'll toggle back and forth again. You can see the change that we anticipated from purchasing 3 dams, removing 2, and bypassing a 3rd. Sort of a world-class project, opened access to over 2,000 miles of habitat that wasn't accessible before. So here in my hand is a picture of the Great Works Dam before and then after. It's formed a fine channel on the right side of the bank, and this has grown in since. Here's a picture of taking out the VZ Dam just downstream and the bypass around Howland Dam. So once again, we show this picture of access to the whole watershed, but what it doesn't show you is that there's a lot more happening in the watershed. And here's a picture of a culvert. These are where roads cross under streams. And you can see, as we mapped out the road stream crossings in the Penobscot River watershed, there's a lot more work to do if we want to get fish to headwaters. And that's where most of the best habitat is, in headwaters. That's where the cold water is. And so we're not just looking at mainstream dams, we're also looking at weirs, and we're looking at levees along the floodplains, and we're looking at getting fish into the headwaters. So we had surveys, crews going around the state of Maine over the past 13 years. We just finished a year ago, which is pretty exciting for the state of Maine. Over 27,000 data points, 64,000 photos, so that we can make better decisions about where to put resources to get the most impact for our buck. And have projects go from this not super passable culvert on the left to this beautiful bridge on the right, which even has a little bit of habitat for fish and wildlife to pass along the edges of it. And the responses we've seen from these projects, from the Penobscot, where the river herring populations was just about 0 to nearly 3 million fish coming up for the past few years, and we expect that number to grow. We've seen responses in the harvest. Sorry, this is in Europe. This should be around around $75,000 of annual income to towns from the increased harvest of river herring, thanks to the restoration. It's also providing bait for the lobster industry, food relief for people in Haiti, and increased ground fish fodder. Socially, we can't underestimate the impact for people that live along the river, for the people who had historic treaties rights, like the Penobscot Indian Nation, for people boating, traveling up and down the river. Now there's free-flowing rapids for kayak and whitewater events. And there's all kinds of community connections with the spots, the parks that we created up and down the river where there used to be dams, and now are interpretive trails and places to access the river for fishing and paddling, and a healthier food source for those people that rely on the river for their source of food. So this is part one again, and we'll jump in just a minute to our first presentation. I'd like to end my presentation here. I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to introduce this video from Darius Coombs, who again is the Wampanoag Mashpee tribal member. He's also the director of the Wampanoag and Eastern Woodland interpretation for Plymouth Plantation. So again, this event was slated to happen in Plymouth, Massachusetts, and now we've got this virtual event. Let me pull up this video from Darius, just a second. He recorded it, in a little bit of a windy spot, so you'll have to listen closely as he speaks among the wind, right from Plymouth Plantation. So, without further ado, here is Darius Coombs.
Good day, everybody. My name is Darius Coombs. I am Mashpee Wampanoag. I am the director of the Wampanoag and Algonquin Interpretive Training here at Plymouth Patuxent Museums. Welcome. My people, being Wampanoag Nation, we've been around this area for over 12,000 years. Right? We got lots of Massachusetts, and also Rhode Island, throughout Cape Cod, Nantucket, Penny's Island, Connecticut. That was all down country. At one time, we probably numbered over 100,000 people. Today, being 2020, is probably about, maybe about 15,000 worth living. And I'm going to mention this because it needs to be mentioned. And you get 100,000, why is it down to 15,000? For us as people, there's a major plague came through here a couple years before the colonists had arrived. And what we know about this plague is people's skin turned yellow, people got open sores in their bodies, and they died within 2 or 3 days. And that wiped out anywhere from 70 to 90% of our people within a couple of years. So when the colonists landed, this whole area was already cleared out. They didn't give many names on it. Disease controls called leptospirosis, from French trade ships by the nose with the rats. The fetus would get in the water of the rats, causing an infectious liver disease. But with that said, where we're at right now is what we call Patuxent, and what people call today is Plymouth. Where I'm standing has been a historical site for Wampanoag people, the Patuxent people, right? See, for Wampanoag people, we had about 70 Wampanoag communities. And if you come into this area right here, what is known as Plymouth today, you went up to a native person and asked them, hey, what are you? They will say, I'm Patuxent. How about yourself? And that's how we identify ourselves from what Wampanoag speaking community we're from. And this area right here has actually been a site, okay? We can date back to this area, this site right here for over 12,000 years. And what you see behind me is the Eel River. Rivers are very important for our people. A lot of the time what we did, and still do today, is we come out to the ocean a lot, come out to the rivers, and we do a lot of fishing during the spring and summer. A lot of fishing. We went ocean fishing, freshwater fishing. Rivers were very, very important, still are today. They're considered more or less to be like the highway, you know. We would travel on our boats, what we call machunashes. And these boats we would have would range anywhere from one-man boats to boats big enough to carry 40 men. Okay? You go freshwater fishing, you go saltwater fishing. We did it all. And everything we have for fishing today, we pretty much had back then. We had a line, we had nets, we had fishing spears, we had harpoon, tidal nets, fishing weirs. Although a lot of time back then we used lobster for fishing bait. I don't know many people use lobster today, but that was back then. It was very, very common. The biggest fish we would go for was found out in the rivers. Actually, rivers and oceans go back and forth. And I tell people this fish can be maybe 20 rivers. A lot of it's not found around anymore, though. Not around here. I hear it's coming back in Connecticut and Maine. This fish is called sturgeon. As we might have heard of sturgeon, they're considered to be bottom feeders. The reason I can't find them a lot around anymore is people like their eggs, what they call caviar, right? And the way we traditionally go fishing for the big fish, sturgeon being 20, 30 foot in length, is we would go on our boats, what we call like machunashes, or dugout boats made by fire, burning and scraping out the inside of a log. And we go out at nighttime. We would have pine pitch torches on the end of our boats. And the fish would be attracted to the water level, and they'll flip over their belly, and we'll harpoon them. And the tip of the harpoon was probably maybe the antler of a deer, and that would go inside the fish. And that's when we would drag the fish ashore. Most of the time, the fish got bigger than the boat, so we couldn't put the fish inside the boat. Okay? We also go for fish that migrate back and forth from yield and come back to us, you know? And the salmon, right? And the big fish people know of today is the herring. Great news about the dam removals meant that herring flow again naturally. And that's very, very important for our people. There's a lot of work around Plymouth, other parts of Massachusetts, that removing the dams let that herring run. And when the herring runs, they go upstream in the springtime. And that's a sign for our new year. So they come up in the springtime and the swamp lay their eggs, okay? And we eat a lot of the herring as Wampanoag people. We eat plenty of herring. It's a great food still to today. We do a lot of frying of herring. We smoke herring. It's really, really good. And also what chases the herring out of the striped bass. And that's another fish that comes with us during the spring and summer. But the herring is used not just for food, but used as a fertilizer, right? As Native people. And a fertilizer is a very famous story people know of today, right? They know of the toxic Wampanoag man when the Pilgrims landed, how he would take a herring and dig a hole in the ground and put the herring inside the hole, mound it over as a fertilizer. So herring was used as a fertilizer, as a fish, as a fertilizer. But we ate quite a bit, and it gives us sort of plenty of nutrients. But the salmon, same thing. Trouts, the herring, very, very important amongst our people, going back 12,000 years all the way up to the present day.
Hello, everyone. Again, Darius apologizes for not being able to make this presentation himself. And can see, filmed it just for us a little while ago. We're super thankful for him doing that and getting a little bit of a taste of his perspective from the indigenous peoples of Massachusetts, of Plymouth, Massachusetts. So next on our agenda is John Waldman. John is the professor of biology at Queens College of the city of New York City. And John, if you can unmute yourself and start sharing your screen. Very much looking forward to your history of rivers and river restoration, starting from what went wrong to begin with. Thank you, John.
Okay, thank you, Josh, and greetings, everyone. I consider the restoration of migratory freshwater sea fish as one of the world's greatest conservation failures. And I know that's kind of a strong statement, but I think it's valid. I'm going to briefly cover reasons for decline and the nature of that decline. And I'm going to focus on U.S. Atlantic rivers because that's the area that I know best, and also I think it's very well documented. The image I'm showing here on the introductory slide is from the Hudson River. You see a fishing camp in the background, and it's from 1886 from Benson Lossing. And it's not an accident that all three species pictured are anadromous and not resident species. These are the fish that would be born in the rivers, go to sea, put on tremendous amounts of biomass, and then very predictably deliver very edible, if not delicious, fish flesh to feed Native Americans and colonists. And they were a huge part of our American heritage. On our East Coast, we have about a dozen species of these fish. And you can see they're phylogenetically diverse. It's a very unique life history pattern. There are about 20,000 plus species of fish in the world, and fewer than 200 are diadromous. But those that are often flourish in enormous numbers. And in working on a book that I titled Running Silver, river running silver was an evocative term from the early days when a river was so full of the flashing bodies of migratory fish that it was said to be running silver. I collected many quotes about what early Europeans saw when they came to North America. They were coming from a continent that had been overfished for centuries. And my absolute favorite is this one. In a word, it is unbelievable, indeed undescribable, as also incomprehensible what quantity is found there. One must behold oneself. It must have been amazing. And in looking at case histories of these rivers, one that really grabbed me was the story of the Susquehanna. The Susquehanna River was probably the best shad river on the whole coast. And shad used to run inland 500 miles to the center of New York State. They fed the entire valley. They were a huge part of the culture. Some of the runs were so large that they said the water would bulge as the schools came upstream. Well, and I estimate there were tens of millions of fish in each run. 4 dams were built in the lower main stem, and they have fish elevators and fish ladders. And there's an attempt to restore these fish to their historical spawning grounds. In recent years, they've had anywhere from 0 to about 200 plus fish actually pass the 4th dam. And this is not atypical for East Coast rivers. The paradigm of fish ways is not working to bring these fish back. So I worked on a paper with my colleague, Karin Lindberg, that we published in Bioscience that looked at the overall status of migratory fish on the Atlantic coast of North America and Europe. We looked at species persistence and found that shad had lost half their populations, Atlantic salmon in North America about a third. Another metric was fish size. And in fact, it's not a good, easily quantifiable metric, but my favorite data point that I found was that, and these are shad from the Delaware River from quite a long time ago. You don't see them this size anymore. In the year 1800, they ran roughly 40 to the barrel. And the year 1900, they were about 100 to the same size barrel. So we have lost our larger sizes of these fish. But the most compelling information was our quantitative look at the sizes of populations or species on both coasts. So we have Europe on the right and North America on the left. And you see that in situation after situation, just tremendous crashes. These are all normalized to 1 and 0. Sturgeon just plummeted, shad just plummeted. Everything else pretty much shot down to relic sizes, except for striped bass, where they were driven down by one primary driver, which was overfishing And when that was relieved, the fish came back. And when you summarize all this really dismal information, you find that there were 98% declines from historic highs in 13 and 90% in an additional 11. So it's really a horror story. And part of this, I think, stems from the shifting baseline syndrome, where we forget what we had in terms of our restoration efforts. These are shad landings from the Potomac River from 1887 to about 2000. And you can see that it has been nothing to be proud of. We've had a tremendous crash in the size of this population. And you think 1887 might be a good starting point. But compare 1887 now with 1814. 1887 is just dwarfed by our original starting numbers. So it's very important when thinking about restoring these fish and getting a real handle as to what these systems were capable of producing to go way back in time, wherever possible. So how did we get there? I like to think about the situation as involving drivers and tractability. Drivers are what brings the populations down, and tractability is our ability to actually remedy that. So one category is those that are largely rectified. And pollution, in my mind, was never that huge a problem. I know there are some systems where it has been problematic, but overall, pollution is not the reason we lost these fish. In the case of the Hudson River, which I know very well, we had far larger populations of shad in the bad old polluted days than we do now in the cleaner water. It's not pollution that I think is really that huge a problem. Then we have drivers that are tractable and mostly applied. And one example is overfishing. And overfishing is conceptually very simple. You just take fewer fish, but it's culturally and socially difficult because of vested interests. We also have power plants, and power plants on certain rivers like the Hudson and the Delaware take in vast amounts of water and suck in huge amounts of eggs and larvae. And the good news here is that as the older open cycle cooling plants fade away, they'll be replaced by closed cycle cooling. So that'll be less of a problem in the future too. Then we have drivers that are essentially untractable. And I think non-native species does not receive enough credit. You know, there's a reason why these fish make these energetically costly migrations to the headwaters of rivers. And that seems to be that these are great locations to leave eggs in where they won't have a lot of competition or predation. But by introducing so many non-native species, like the snakehead, for instance, in Chesapeake Bay, these outmigrating juveniles have to swim past a gauntlet of predators they didn't evolve to coexist with. We also have climate, and climate is, in theory, reversible, but I don't think any of us believe that this situation with warming is turning around anytime soon. And to give you an example, the smelt, which is a cold water species, used to run into the Chesapeake Bay until the year 1800, into Delaware River until 1900, into the Hudson until the year 2000, is gone from Connecticut and is being lost in Massachusetts very quickly. So climate is having an effect on the distributions and the phenologies of these fish. So what is tractable but still unrectified? I'm going to give you a riddle. What did the fish say when it swam into the wall? This is an old joke, forgive me, but oh damn. This is the Conowingo Dam, the giant dam that blocks the next 500 miles of the Susquehanna. And dams like that have done tremendous damage to inland migrations. This is a map of the inland penetration of shad from the 1800s, and they went far inland. Here you can see the Susquehanna terminating way up here. My colleagues estimated that we've lost 40% of that range. So what's the solution? Well, the best solution is not fishways, which haven't worked well on the East Coast. The best solution is dam removal. And we have a great Atlantic coast precedent. In 1999, the Edwards Dam fell on the Kennebec River. It was located right here. It opened up 17 miles of main stem, but it also allowed access to the Sebastopol River for the first time in 162 years. And the run size there went from 0 to 1 million in several years to 6 million today. It's now providing huge amounts of bait for lobster fishermen and has engendered herring festivals. So let me finish up
just
by—
a bit more, John.
What's that?
Just a couple minutes, John.
Yeah, I'm just about done. Let me finish up with riddle 2. Why did the fish cross the road? Well, you might have guessed it. It's the spawn. This is one of my favorite images. It's from the West Coast. I believe it's chum salmon crossing a flooded road to get to their spawning grounds. But it just shows you the incredible biological imperative and drive to get to where they need to go. And it reminds me of the mantra from the Field of Dreams, where the mantra was, build it and they will come. I think with the River of Dreams, the mantra should be, take it down and they will come. Thank you. You're muted.
Oh, thank you, John, very much. And if you unshare, I think we should move right along to our next speaker, which is Bob Irvine, the President and CEO of American Rivers, responsible for a lot of the work that John was just talking about, that if we take these dams out of the rivers, if we restore this habitat, they actually do come back. If you have questions for John, please put them in the chat. Sorry, not in the chat, but in the questions and answer. And we'll get those to John so we can answer them afterwards. But without further ado, looks like you're all queued up, Bob. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Josh. Hi, everybody. I'm Bob Irvin. I'm President and CEO of American Rivers. At American Rivers, our mission is to protect wild rivers, restore damaged rivers, and conserve clean water for people and nature. And at American Rivers, we believe that life needs rivers, whether it's the fish and wildlife that depend on clean, healthy, free-flowing rivers, or whether it's our communities and families that depend on those rivers as well, or all of us who enjoy rivers for recreation, or recognize that we need rivers for life itself. When I think about rivers, I think about them as literally our veins and arteries of our nation. And I think this map really shows that so well. And like the veins and arteries in our bodies, we have to take care of them. We have to keep them clean and free-flowing in order for us to be healthy. Unfortunately, in the United States and around the world, we haven't done such a great job of that, as John just described for us. This is another one of my favorite maps that I refer to as the smallpox map, because it really does look like our country has a bad case of it. And these are the dams on the national inventory of dams. There's more than 90,000 of these in our country. And estimates are that there are actually more than 2 million dams in the United States, many of which have been here for centuries, since European settlement, and many of which are obsolete and unsafe now. And dams create a lot of problems. This is one of the 4 large dams on the Klamath River in Northern California and Southern Oregon. And obviously dams block fish passage, but they create other problems as well, like this one, outbreaks of blue-green algae in the Klamath River, cyanobacteria, which those of you who have been keeping up with the news know that in Botswana a couple of months ago, more than 300 elephants were killed as a result of coming into contact with cyanobacteria. It is lethal to wildlife and to humans. Unfortunately, American Rivers and our partners are working to take out the 4 large dams on the Klamath River. And while there have been some recent snags in the process, we're still hopeful that by 2022, those dams will come out. And indeed, for those of you in the United States, tomorrow is a national day of action to convince the owners of these dams, Pacificor, which is a company owned by Warren Buffett, to live up to its part of the agreement and go forward with taking out these dams. Now, John just told you a little bit about this dam. This is the Edwards Dam on the Kennebec River in Maine. And this is where the national and now global dam removal movement really began. A little over 30 years ago in 1999. The Edwards Dam was a hydropower dam that had been there for 162 years. But when it came time to renew its license, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, which is the body that licensed dams in this country, ordered that this dam be removed because it concluded that the costs of the dam in terms of blocking fish passage and creating pollution outweighed the benefits to it as well. And this was a real milestone in American and indeed world environmental history. And I'm proud to say that my organization, American Rivers, played a key role in bringing about the order to remove this dam. And it has been a tremendous success. Since the removal of the Edwards Dam, the population of alewives, river herring, has exploded in the Kennebec River. Today, more than 2 million alewives return to the river, and it has the largest run of alewives on the eastern seaboard. In addition to that, it has really revitalized Augusta, Maine. When this town was built and grew into a small city, it had its back to the river because the river was this polluted open sewer, basically, that the dam was helping to create. Now that the dam is removed and the river is restored, the city is once again turning to face the river, and it's viewed as central to the economic revitalization of that community. Well, here's the good part of the story. We are really seeing a growth in the dam removal movement in the United States. And you can see that in the period since 1999 to the present, we have had an exponential growth in dams coming out. Last year in 2019, there were 90 dams removed in 26 states, reconnecting more than 900 miles of river. Now, it's important to note that American Rivers, while we work to remove obsolete and unsafe dams, we don't argue that every dam should come out. In some cases, dams continue to serve a useful purpose. And so in those cases, we want to see how those dams are operated changed to, as closely as possible, replicate the natural flow of the river. And a lot of dams serve the purpose of generating hydropower, which has become increasingly important as we look for alternatives to burning fossil fuels to address climate change. But you know, there's only about 2,500 dams in this, out of the more than 90,000 dams in this country that actually generate hydropower. And in those cases, you know, we should look to see the operations of the dam are done in a way to minimize their impacts. And in some cases, it's time for those dams to come out because dams were not built to last forever. In the words of our former Secretary of the Interior in the Clinton administration, Bruce Babbitt, dams are not like the pyramids of Egypt that stand for eternity. They are instruments that should be judged by the health of the rivers to which they belong. There are many reasons why we are seeing a growth in the dam removal movement. And that includes that a lot of dams are crumbling. They've lived beyond their useful life. Dams are also coming up for renewal of their licenses, like the Condit Dam on the White Salmon River, which came out a few years ago. There's the before and after pictures. Other laws, like the Endangered Species Act, require us to look at what are the impacts of dams on fish and wildlife and can result in decisions to remove those dams. And then our awareness and support for dam removal is growing. My organization, American Rivers, has on its website at americanrivers.org lots of resources about dam removals, how to do it. We conduct trainings all over the country for that. And I invite you to go to our website to see that. Now,
we're gonna close up if we can.
Okay. Well, then I'll just quickly run through and show you a couple of examples. This is the Middle Fork Nooksack outside of Bellingham, Washington, where we've taken out this dam this summer, restoring habitat for salmon, which is also important to the population of orcas in Puget Sound. And we're very pleased to see that happening. You've already heard from Josh about the Penobscot, where 2 large dams were taken out. And as a result, more than 1,000 miles of habitat has been restored in the Penobscot with no loss of hydropower because of changes in how upstream facilities were operated. And it looks like this today. And the last one I'll tell you about begins with a bang. This is near my home in Maryland. This is the Bloody Dam on the Patapsco River. And we took this dam out over a year ago. And today it looks like it actually looks even better than this. This is shortly after deconstruction. But it is a great free-flowing river and provides habitat for shad and other species. Globally, we still have a lot of work to do. The rivers in red are ones that have significant dams and obstructions on them. And globally, there are more than 60,000 dams planned or under construction worldwide. So we don't want to slide back after we've made all this progress in dam removal. And this is a global movement. A couple of years ago, last year, I had the privilege of going to Estonia with my friends from the World Fish Migration Foundation and Dam Removal Europe to Parnu, the River Parnu, where the largest dam removal in Europe took place. And we now have a free-flowing river there.
We really do need to finish up, Bob.
All right, I will wrap it up and just say that this is the most hopeful work that I've ever been involved with. If we're smart enough to take these dams out, the rivers come back amazingly quickly. So thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you, Bob, very much. It's incredible work that's being done around the world and very inspiring. Why don't you unshare your screen, and Lynn, you can start to share your screen after he's done. And I'll just introduce Lynn Scarlett from the Nature Conservancy. She is our Chief External Affairs Officer. She's been with us for many years and actually was an inspiration for a lot of very early policy change that makes this work so much easier and inspired a lot of our work around the country and is now inspiring work around the world. So Lynn, thank you so much for joining, and I'm looking forward to your presentation.
Thank you, Josh. It's just great to be with everyone, and Bob, so fantastic to see that work that's been underway. I'm going to shift from the sagas and science of fish and the stories of dam removal to the world of policy and how it undergirds a lot of these efforts at enhancing large-scale transformation. But I want to start by reminding ourselves, of course, we've long been engaged, many of us, in conservation projects, place-based results supported by traditional public and private funding, one project at a time. And so what do we mean by transformation? When I think of transformational outcomes, I think about building upon all those individual projects, public policies, and market dynamics that catalyze conservation and broad shifts to sustainable practices by agencies, corporations, communities, individuals, and by large landscape changes. So things like regenerative agriculture, moving from traditional to new sorts of agriculture. As we've talked about here, resilient and interconnected lands and waters at large scale. Many other touch points for what might be considered transformational. So rivers of fish, let us ask why transformational scale. I think you've seen a glimpse of that with the earlier presentations, but simply put, the pace, scale, and scope of impacts to land, fresh waters, ocean, and wildlife are increasing. You saw the good work that Bob Irvin described, and yet those 60,000 other dams being planned, so many more impacts on the landscape and waters from climate change, interconnected impacts. So the challenges outstrip our capacity to deliver big results, one project at a time, and in ways that are very bounded. So think a little bit more about the setting, the interconnected puzzles and problems, and how this informs the policy underpinnings that we need to help enable these efforts. So of course, the challenges span time and geographic space. They transcend jurisdictional boundaries. You saw a glimpse of that with 2,000 miles of river opened up through the Penobscot. That involved many, many communities, rural areas, cities, and so forth. They require public and private action. Of course, cities and countryside all interconnected. And as you heard in the opening remarks, they involve economic, cultural, social, and ecological effects. Yes, this is about fish, Yes, it's about nature, but it's about people, livelihoods, cultures as well. So, how do we get transformation? Well, certainly you've heard a little bit about some of what it takes, but I want to zero in on one key piece of the picture, and that is the role that public policy and public funding play in helping to enable these transformations at large scale. So when I think about policy solutions that really can be transformational, that can drive this large landscape, large watershed transformation, I think there are three themes that we have to keep in mind. One, we need systems thinking at nested scales. This is not about one grant in one place. It is not just looking at an individual fish species. It is not just looking at pollution. It is looking at the whole system and asking, how do we drive change? Secondly, as you heard from the previous speakers, tremendous amount of collaboration and coordination in what I call network governance. This is not all about the federal government in the US or in other countries taking all the action. It's about towns, cities, counties, federal governments, national governments, all working in collaboration and with tribes, with communities, public and private. And of course, what we're looking for is rules that incentivize sustainable action and remove barriers. And that barrier point is both figurative and literal. You've seen some presentation on dam removal, but there are a lot of institutional barriers as well. Prohibitions, for example, previously, although this is changing, in the US by the Army Corps of Engineers against thinking about natural infrastructure, floodplains, for example, as a way of reducing risk communities from flooding, instead having historically thought about gray infrastructure. So how do we remove that kind of mental map barrier, that kind of policy barrier? So systems thinking, of course, just a quick touch point, it means transdisciplinary, it means a whole systems framework, it means adaptive management. Because as these large river systems, as dams get taken out, as in some cases we engage in some experimentation, we need to adapt and adjust to get the conditions that we're striving for. And of course, as I've already said, that systems thinking requires a social lens, an economic lens, an ecosystem focus. So just a glimpse at systems thinking. One example from the Nature Conservancy, and I'd like to underscore that this is about many needs, many players, many scales. There are performance issues, there are value issues. How do you bring value to the economy? There are enabling conditions. Those are often the policy pieces of the picture. But we've been involved in the Northwest, the Puget Sound area, in something that we and others call floodplains by design. They're working in 15 or more counties in the state of Washington, 36 different projects, probably more by now since the time this slide was made, 38 protected communities. The list goes on. You can see the data here, 2,500 acres of floodplain reconnected, many thousands more underway, and restoring, in this case, salmon habitat, 25 miles of river. All of this had an underpinning of the state of Washington legislature actually creating a floodplain by design grant to help support this. It required some different rule sets that would actually allow removing some of the historic levees and other barriers, and many, many other policy touch points. It also involved that systems thinking science across
Just a half minute, Lynn, if you can.
Yep. So very quickly, thinking about policy for transformation, we need large-scale planning, policies that enhance that coordination and collaboration, getting the incentives right. And I won't go into detail here, but in the US, this includes things like what we call the mitigation hierarchy, large-scale planning, avoid, then mitigate, then minimize, then mitigate, ways to coordinate across jurisdictions, and of course the sort of public-private partnering we saw in the Penobscot. It involves new rules of the game. So National Environmental Policy Act, rules that actually enhance collaboration and kind of put a stamp of approval on collaborative efforts to do work at large scale. I won't go through again all these details because my time is coming to a close. But when we think, for example, about species, pivoting away from one species to thinking of multi-species habitat conservation plans that are focused on whole ecosystems and multiple species. And then, of course, the incentives, again, safe harbor agreements that help pull the private sector into doing endangered species protection, public funding criteria that actually focus on criteria for climate and biodiversity benefits, rules in the Army Corps in the US, but the same is applicable elsewhere, of engineering with nature as an acceptable solution set. You've heard about the Penobscot River, transformation at a glance. Look what it took. You heard Josh Roy talk about this, but look at all the partners and all the pieces of the picture and more that are missing here. So I want to end by taking us back to the 1800s. John Wesley Powell, he once opined way back then that there's a body of interdependent and unified interests and values all collected in a hydrographic basin. The people in such a district have common interests, common rights, common duties, and must necessarily work together for common purposes. So some people have had this vision for a long time, but thankfully we're now putting it back onto the map and in our thinking. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Lynn. That was great. Beautiful overrun. A lot of richness there that I hope we can tap into later with the questions and answers, and get back to folks who are asking some questions in the Q&A. If you can stop sharing your screen, we can get George Pess up next from NOAA. George Pess is the manager for the watershed program at NOAA's Northwest Fisheries Center. And let's see, Lynn, can you unshare?
I tried to do that. Oh, here
Give
we
it
go.
another shot.
Here we go.
There we go.
Did it
Beautiful. George, you're up.
Okay, thank you very much, Josh. So I am going to talk today about ecosystem response to the removal of the Elwha River dams. And I'd like to acknowledge all the groups and entities that have been involved over the last several decades. There's too many individuals and groups to name, but this gives you a glimpse of it. So the Elwha River is located in the United States in the northwest corner, and the Elwha River is located in the northwest corner of Washington State on the Olympic Peninsula. Most of the river is part of the Olympic National Park, and two dams were built on the river in the early 1900s, one at River Kilometer 8, the Elwha River Dam, and then another one at River Kilometer 22, the Glines Canyon Dam. Both of them did not have fish passage, and over 90% of the habitat has been inaccessible for over 100 years to anadromous salmon and steelhead that were returning to the river. Those dams started the removal process in 2011, and the last remnants of the dam were removed in 2014. So one of the biggest questions that they had with these dam removals, because they were high head dams over 30 meters in height, is what was going to happen to the 21 million cubic meters of sediment that was stored behind these dams. So what I'm showing you here is on the x-axis is time from June of 2011 to June of 2017. And on the y-axis is an indicator of the sediment supply and how it changed over time, turbidity. So the dams started, the removal process started in September of 2011. And by April of 2012, the Elwha Dam was removed. And you could see kind of an increase in the sediment supply during that time. But really, the sediment really started to come downstream once Mills Reservoir, which was above the second dam, Glines Canyon Dam, was fully exposed to erosion. And what I mean by this, there was no more reservoir effect. It was a running river, so all the sediment was exposed to be eroded, and that's when we started to see a lot of the sedimentation. Glines was removed by October of 2014, and you can still see that we had pulses of sediment past that. But really, the peak suspended sediment concentration happened after Mills Reservoir was exposed to erosion, and now since 2016 has decreased it back down to background levels, what we saw prior to dam removal. So in summary, we had about over 20 million cubic meters of sediment released to the river. This is a photograph of Mills Reservoir. About 11% of that was stored in the river itself, but over 90% of that sediment was released to the Strait of Juan de Fuca, and about a third of it basically deposited and created the estuary we now know on the Elwha River. So fish are now getting past the dam, and this is just a schematic of all the different species that have gotten past the former dam sites. So take a look at the bottom of your screen there. You can see there's 3 species that are kind of headed up to the headwaters already: Chinook salmon, steelhead, and bull trout. And now bull trout were already up there, and I'll tell you an interesting story about them in a minute. But we've seen sockeye, coho, chum, and pink salmon all in the area near or above the second dam. So fish are starting to distribute themselves across the entire river basin. We've also seen an increase in population size correlated with the dams. I'm not saying that it's simply due to the dam removal, but definitely dam removal is part of that. So you can see here we have year on the x-axis, and on the first y-axis we have total Chinook salmon. And you can see that for Chinook salmon, we have a population of around a couple thousand prior to dam removal, and it's gone up to about a little over 7,000 recently. With steelhead, which is on the second y-axis here, you can see that we had in the hundreds, and now over the last several years, we've seen about over 1,500 winter steelhead. Now, the sedimentation did have some immediate impacts, particularly to chum salmon and pink salmon, in terms of smolt out migrations. So these are the number of fish that are out migrating as juveniles to the Strait of Juan de Fuca. And you can see that there was some impacts during dam removal, not so much with Chinook salmon. We've seen new species. One notable one is Pacific lamprey. They've made a 12-fold increase in the last 3 years following dam removal. We've also seen sockeye salmon in small numbers. However, based on the genetics, these are mostly strays and not necessarily from the Elwha themselves, most of which have been from Alaska and British Columbia. So I've talked to you about how dam removal allowed for Chinook salmon and others to migrate upstream and spawn. But I want to tell you a little bit about some other things, reawakening of life history. Life history diversity is really important to salmonids. So bull trout, which mostly were housed up above the dams, are now able to migrate downstream, feed in the marine waters, and come back bigger and stronger. So we've seen a reawakening of that life history strategy. With steelhead are basically seagoing rainbow trout. So we've seen winter steelhead migrate upstream, but we also had a resident rainbow population upstream already. So we've seen the offspring of both the winter steelhead and the resident rainbow go out into the ocean, but come back at a different time as summer steelhead. So we've seen a reawakening of summer steelhead that adds to that 1,500 or 1,600 fish, about 900 summer steelhead over the last 4 years. So that reawakening of life history is really critical to increasing abundance as well. There were impacts to the benthic invertebrates such as mayflies and stoneflies and caddisflies. We saw a 95% reduction during the highest sediment supply years. But we've also seen a comeback from these aquatic insects, a big bounce back in aquatic insects over time in the recent years. And fish changed their diet as a function of that sediment slug. So I want to focus on the upper bar graph here, and particularly in years 2013 and 14, you could see prior to that, most of the proportion of the diet of these fish was aquatic, but it turned to terrestrial when the benthic invert numbers of the aquatic insects went down, and now we're starting to see that bounce back. We've seen links to the food web in terms of terrestrial animals as well. The American dipper, which loves to eat salmon eggs, has seen a higher survival. We've seen them go from migratory populations to resident year-round populations, and they have a higher likelihood of actually having more broods in a given year. So in summary, the dams have come down, and we're seeing fish pass them. Over half of the sediment that was stored was released. Most of it went into the Strait of Juan de Fuca, and it created the delta that we now see, although a portion's in the river. Salmon are making it above the former dam sites in the hundreds to the thousands, and we've seen both hatchery and wild fish contribute to the development of that population. We've seen new species such as lamprey, growth benefits to bull trout, and the reawakening of summer steelhead, likely owing to the harboring of genetics in the upriver resident populations. And lastly, we saw benthic inverts be reduced, but now making a comeback. We saw a immediate shift in diet due to dam removal, now making a comeback. And American dippers altering their behavior and their productivity benefits associated with the salmon. So again, I'd like to thank everybody who's been involved, and thank you. That's it.
Awesome, George. Oh my gosh, what a great bunch of information. But I love that you're able to skim so many taxa and sediment and bring that much fuller picture together. Folks, if you've got questions for George or any of the other speakers, please remember to put them in the question and answer button, the Q&A. And also remember that all their short bios are in the program that Meg sent out when you registered and got your registration confirmed. So next, Carrie, we're gonna bring up Carrie Selberg. You can share your screen. She's the director of the Office of Habitat Conservation for NOAA Fisheries. So it's a pleasure to have you, Carrie, as you bring up your screen and put it into presentation mode. And I'm looking forward to your talk. Thank you so much for joining us. And be sure to unmute yourself as well, Carrie. Perfect. Oh, there we go.
Had to unmute myself there. All right. Good afternoon, everybody. I am so excited to be here. I am the director of the Office of Habitat at NOAA Fisheries. And for those of you who don't know us, we're a federal agency, and my office is engaged in the protection and restoration of marine and coastal habitats. I want to start with a huge thank you to all the organizers for setting up this virtual gathering to celebrate World Fish Migration Day. And although this year's celebration may look a little bit different, and we're not all together, I do really appreciate being here with all of you today. I think this is a really important event to do a couple of things. One, as we've been doing, is sharing some of our success stories, but also to continue to build a community of practice around this work. We have a lot of success stories to share and a lot to build on into the future. And before I dive into my presentation, I do want to emphasize one key point that I think you have been hearing throughout all of these presentations. Partnerships and community engagement are critical to this work. None of it can be done alone. I have a lot of members of the NOAA team on this webinar today and a lot of partners of NOAA on the webinar today. And I am excited to share just a couple of examples of our collective work together. I'm going to tell you a little bit about why and how NOAA engages in fish passage, and then I'm going to highlight two of our programs and a couple of examples of our work under each program. So some of you may wonder why we're involved in this work at NOAA Fisheries. For some of you might know about our work managing commercial fisheries or recovering endangered species, and fish passage and barrier removal are absolutely critical to both of those mission areas. It directly supports our efforts to recover those endangered species and to ensure the continued sustainability of our recreational and commercial fisheries. We use a lot of different strategies to do that. Our fish passage activities work to maintain unimpeded access to habitat where barriers don't yet exist. Open access to habitat where fish are prevented from passing, and ensuring that that passage is safe, timely, and effective. And with the involvement and support of our partners, we're seeing results, and we're opening up rivers and streams for fish migration. So one of the programs I'm going to talk about is focused on hydropower. So as we all know, hydropower dams can affect habitat and prevent fish from completing their upstream or downstream migrations. And we strive to partner with other federal agencies, industry, states, NGOs, and tribes under our Federal Power Act authorities to implement solutions to reopen rivers to migratory fish. So non-federal hydropower projects in the United States generally operate under a license from the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, or FERC, for 30 to 50 years. And when those licenses need to be renewed, NOAA has an opportunity to review how the power plant operates and require changes to project structures and operations in order to provide for effective fish migration. NOAA can also recommend habitat improvements at this time. So an example of our work in this area is shown here. It's at the Portland General Electric's Clackamas hydropower facility in Oregon. So I had an opportunity to visit this site a couple of years ago, and I was incredibly impressed. That top right picture is actually mine. I saw the floating surface collector and the hands-free adult fish sorter, which separates the wild fish from the hatchery fish without needing to handle the fish, sending only wild fish upstream to spawn. So over the course of this multi-year relicensing effort for this project, we worked with more than 30 different organizations, including Portland General Electric, several different state and federal government agencies, tribal organizations, and recreational groups to collectively develop this state-of-the-art fish passage. And we're seeing results. This approach has greatly improved threatened fish populations while continuing to provide hydroelectric power to the grid. So a couple of examples, wild spring Chinook returns are at almost 200% of the 10-year average. Early run coho returns are at more than 350% of the 10-year average, and more diverse life histories are now present in the system. So we have examples of this all over the country. We're just choosing to highlight one today. And now I want to talk a little bit about another program. So in addition to our hydropower relicensing, we also support habitat restoration projects all across the country through our efforts like our community-based restoration program. So this program provides technical and financial assistance for projects that ensure fish have access to high-quality habitat. So we've already heard about several of these projects today, which has been really fun for me to see. And we actually have already heard about this project too. This is a project that is also close to my home in Washington, D.C., the Bloaty Dam removal. And I wasn't brave enough to show a video, so this is a still of the video you guys saw a little bit earlier in this webinar. And this project is a part of a 10-year watershed-scale restoration effort that actually resulted in the removal of 3 dams on the Patapsco River in Maryland. And that picture on the left, like I said, is a still of the explosives being used to initiate the dam removal. The Bloaty Dam served as the first barrier on the Patapsco River that fish encountered when migrating to and from the Chesapeake Bay. So its removal opened up more than 65 miles of spawning habitat for shad and river herring. But I also think another important thing to note is it also benefited local communities by addressing a long-term public safety hazard and by allowing more recreational opportunities like fishing and canoeing. So in addition to the LWA project that we just heard about, this project on the Bloaty Dam is one of the largest and most complicated dam removals NOAA has ever been involved with. And it showcases the cooperative nature of habitat conservation. And I really think it's a model for other areas challenged by outdated dams and water infrastructure. It's an example of using our partnerships to achieve both ambitious conservation and public safety goals. We invested almost $9 million from multiple funding sources for this Bloaty Dam removal through a collaborative process. And our partners on this one are way too numerous to thank here. And many of you are probably on this webinar, but I do want to extend a special thank you to our partners at American Rivers for their leadership in this project. So this is just a taste of different types of fish passage work that NOAA is engaged in with many of our partners across the United States. I really do appreciate everyone else's presentations as well and learning about our work all across the world. Let's keep those success stories rolling. Thanks.
Awesome, Carrie. Thank you so much. One thing that you miss with these webinars is the roar of applause that there should be right now for hearing all the work that you're doing and some really exciting projects. I'm going to share now a video from the Penobscot River Restoration Project, which you've already heard from people involved with the project, the American Rivers, the Nature Conservancy, Maine Audubon, Trout Unlimited, and Natural Resources Council of Maine, and of course the Penobscot Indian Nation. So I've got a short video from one of the Penobscot Indian Nation elders, Butch Phillips, which I'm happy to share here. Enjoy.
My ancestors traveled up and down this river, literally thousands of years, and they gained all their necessities from life off the land and the river. They had literally millions of fish swimming by this island and the other islands every spring to harvest for their sustenance. Over time, there grew this special relationship with the land and the Creator, between the people and Mother Earth and all her creatures. And as a child, I grew up here on the reservation on Indian Island, and spent most of my youth on the river. This was our playground growing up in the 50s. Here. But I always dreamed that someday the dams would be removed. But I never thought in my lifetime I would ever see dams being removed from the Penobscot River and a section being free-flowing again, as my ancestors experienced it. The Penobscot River Restoration Project is really a unique collaboration between an Indian tribe, 7 conservation groups, the power company, the federal government, and the state of Maine. And I say this is unique because in the past we've had numerous disputes. The Penobscot River Restoration Trust has brought all these groups together in this unique collaboration, all on the same page, all working for the restoration of the Penobscot River. Their forethought and their planning have created this project that is beneficial to everyone. It's beneficial to the power companies. It's beneficial to the municipalities along this river. It's beneficial to the fish, beneficial to the Penobscot Nation. And this project is literally a dream come true for me. And I can't wait for the day that I see the sea-run fish, which I call the refugees of the Penobscot River, return once again to their ancestral spawning ground and to our home, the Penobscot Nation.
There we go. I'm sorry, some of you, looks like the video was cutting out. I'm not sure why that was happening. It was running smoothly from here, but we will post the videos as well as the recording on the website that you'll be able to access later. So now I'd like to introduce David Gould. We sort of jumped over David Gould, but he is the Director of Marine and Environmental Affairs for the town of Plymouth, Massachusetts. David, I see you're unmuted. That's great. And you'll be sharing a PowerPoint. There we go. Beautiful.
Hey everyone, I'm David Gould, Director of Marine and Environmental Affairs for the town of Plymouth. And in about 5 or 6 minutes, we're going to go through about 20 years of river restoration in our community. So as most of you know, Plymouth is pretty famous for being the landing place of the Pilgrims, which means we have 400 years of development and industrialization after that landing happened. And what that really also means is that there was 400 years of opportunity to alter the landscape significantly, including our rivers and wetlands. And so that presents some significant challenges. Industrial Revolution era dams, site contamination, both sediment behind the dams, as well as in upland soils at our former mill sites, a long history of agricultural activities, wetland alterations, especially here locally in Massachusetts in cranberry farming, which resulted in some very poor fish passage, very poor water quality, a lot of public safety concerns. A lot of the crests of our dams are actually access roads, either to people's homes or actual roadways themselves that the public uses every day. And those dams present a significant risk to overtopping and flood risks. In a town of 400 years old, we also have some significant historic and archaeological concerns that we need to deal with. So what do those challenges look like? Well, they look like this dam. This is the Billington Street Dam on Town Brook, which flows into Plymouth Harbor. You can see the outdated culvert, the outdated fish ladder, the earthen dam over the top. And this was actually the site of our first dam removal back in 2001. These are some of the challenges that 400 years of industrialization and development resulted in. It also resulted in industrial era mill buildings like this one, which actually was built over the river. So a significant impact from those kind of activities as well as agricultural impacts. These are cranberry bogs where the river channel has been diked, dammed, channelized, altered. You can see that there's also water impoundments associated with some of these agricultural activities, which altered the entire thermal regime of the river. And then some of them also have associated mill dams associated with them, as you see in the bottom corner there. So what does that mean for all these fish and these resources that we do have that we're able to survive even with all of this activity going on? Well, it means we had a lot of work to do. So talk a little bit about some of that work that we've been able to achieve in our community. So what can be done? We can identify all those opportunities, also known as problems, and I do think the perception matters. All those challenges that we just mentioned are opportunities to do significant improvement. And we began to methodically address all of those, especially here on Town Brook. We realized that the issues developed over time, and it's going to take a long time to improve the situation. And I think we've proven that point. We've been working on these projects for over 20 years, and we're still going strong. We've had some absolutely amazing partnerships, a lot of partnerships with folks that have presented here today. And we keep doing the work. It's not always easy, but we do keep pushing, and eventually that change will happen. And I hope others do that same thing. So by doing all those things, I'm going to show you some of the slides that we have quickly about if you do that work and you keep pressing on, what kind of changes you can see. So this is one of our former cranberry bogs, a lot of essentially a monoculture, but a few different species in there. And by doing restoration work, we're able to change these sites. And this is the same photograph shown 3 times from the same location. You'll see that change over time with wood being installed in the stream channel and a lot of stream work going on and alteration of the surface, and then eventually turning into a site like this with a lot more complexity and habitat diversity. You can also see sites like this. This is our most recent dam removal, the Holmes Dam removal. The former impoundment that you can see in the background there has been drained out. The area you see in the foreground and the river actually taking shape was completely buried in a culvert. And so this is about halfway through that construction project. And you can take a site like this and turn it into a site like this with a restored river that's been daylighted, fish can pass through, safer infrastructure, including the removal of the dam, obviously, but also with the bridge, and also park amenities like you see here. And who can do this work? Well, we're a local municipality, and so we do a lot of it, but we certainly partner with our state, and our federal agencies have been terrific partners. There's nonprofits like the groups you've heard earlier, like the American Rivers and the Nature Conservancy that do terrific work. And then there's local watershed groups and associations, not only here in Massachusetts, but around the country that do good work. And I want to make sure I give a shout out to my friends down in Arkansas and the Friends of Little Sugar Creek who are working to restore their river. And they keep plugging away, and a lot of groups do as well. And they should be proud of the work they're doing. So again, the power of partnerships. Our most long-standing partnership has been with NOAA and the NOAA Restoration Center. All of our work has been in partnership with NOAA, and none of it would have happened without them. So I can't begin to express how wonderful their support, both in terms of funding, but also in technical research and support has been, as well as Fish and Wildlife Service. And you can see that we've pretty much partnered with any state, federal, local, or private nonprofit out there. And so I would encourage you to do the same. There's a lot of folks out there that will help you on the way, and those partnerships are invaluable. And of course, our most valuable partnership has been the residents of the town of Plymouth, which have provided us with unprecedented support over the last 20 years to restore our natural resources. Some of the lessons we've learned, we certainly do think watershed wide. We build momentum and credibility over time. I can't stress enough to others how even the small projects are important in building credibility. Those partnerships, as mentioned again, are incredibly important. We keep making progress every day. It's not always early, especially when you go through the permitting process for some of these projects, but keep plugging away. It does matter. And a little bit about our accomplishments, what we've been able to achieve in those last 20 years. We've been able to complete over a dozen different restoration projects on 4 different stream systems here in Plymouth. We've removed 6 jurisdictional dams, which are those that are 5 feet or larger, 6 non-jurisdictional dams, 5 feet or lower, and 19 barriers within those former cranberry bog complexes that impeded fish passage. Along with those stream restoration projects, we've also been able to restore over 250 acres of wetlands and floodplain habitat associated with those streams and rivers. And we have more projects to come. We have several projects we're working on right now and hope to accomplish in the next few years. So more to come here in Plymouth. And lastly, I want to thank my two favorite artists, my daughter Sarah and Nancy Carroll, who we know locally as the Herring Lady, for reasons like wearing all those herring on her dress, for their wonderful background behind me today with the happy fish and all the fish behind me. So thank you, everybody, and happy World Fish Migration Day.
Nice. That's fantastic, Dave. And I'm so sorry that we weren't able to be there in your hometown. If you can unshare right now while Herman cues up his video. I think it would have been amazing to see that work in person and to celebrate along with the town of Plymouth. So next up, Herman's got this video. Thank you, Herman, for queuing it up.
Hey everyone, I'm Happy Fish. I'm an ambassador for World Fish Migration, and I make a lot of people smile when they meet me. I'm way more than just a metal fish. A happy fish gets to live in really nice places with the ability to migrate from one habitat to another without any obstructions. I've spent the last year or so in Plymouth, Massachusetts. This town has done a lot of work removing dams, obstructions, and barriers to fish passage. They've also restored a lot of freshwater wetlands. It's been a great time hanging out with the staff from the Department of Marine and Environmental Affairs, and I've gotten to see some of the historic sites in town and met some pretty interesting people. So I gotta tell you, this town really likes its fish. During the holidays, Plymouth sets up a lobster pot tree. I mean, come on, it's not every day that a town celebrates a lobster. Now here I am over at Plymouth Rock. This is the exact same rock that the Mayflower passengers stepped onto 400 years ago. Pretty amazing. Here I am at the Forefathers Monument, and here I am over at Town Brook. And it was so cold that day, but good to be back in the water. So get this, during my visit, my friends removed a 400-year-old dam so I could swim all the way up Town Brook. And then after the project was finished, they even let me test out the new skate park along the stream. Check me out. And then I went to this one nice place right on the waterfront, but got a little scared when I saw a sign that said fish market. But thankfully everything turned out all right. The staff even wanted a photo, and hey, who am I to say no? I even got to leave town a few times and met some cool people like Alex Harrow from the United States Geological Survey's Conti Lab in Turners Falls, Massachusetts. As they say around here, he's wicked smart. So I've met some really interesting people in the town of Plymouth. These three guys here, they're my buddies, Mark, Nate, and Mike. They're called wardens, and what they do is protect the fish and wildlife in town. Now, they're always in the exact same green outfits, but we're not judging here, right? But if we're talking fashion, check out this fish-inspired getup by Nancy Carroll, who's known as the Herring Lady in town. This might seem a little weird, but it's actually really cool. Plymouth likes their fish, and that just makes this happy fish even happier. Well, I better get going so I can work on my World Fish Migration Day presentation for the webinar on October 22nd. I hope everyone stays safe and enjoys autumn. I'll keep you all posted about my latest adventures in Plymouth, but for right now, I'm going to turn this video over to some other happy fish in other parts of the world so you can catch up with them. Happy World Fish Migration Day!
Awesome. What a great video. A little bit more of Plymouth and what we would have seen there live. Fantastic. I do want to say this wouldn't be possible without the development.
Josh, before you move on,
yeah.
There is another happy fish video from Canada, and this one first happy fish.
Okay.
This is the first happy fish in Canada. It will be unveiled on Saturday on World Fish Migration Day. So we have a little video from Canada from Christina Little.
How long is this video, Herman? Because we're
2 minutes.
Run it.
Okay, Nicole, can you share it again?
Yep, right now.
Hello, my name is Martin Curtis. I'm the Director of Fisheries and Oceans Canada's Fish and Fish Habitat Protection and Aquaculture Programs here in our Ontario Prairie region.
Je m'appelle Bevras et je suis gestionnaire régional de la planification intégrée à Pêche Océan Canada.
Our Ontario Prairie region spans from the Ontario-Quebec border, west through Manitoba, Saskatchewan, to the Alberta-BC border. Our region is home to more than 225 native freshwater fishes and 41 species of freshwater mussel.
Notre région contient 18% de l'eau douce du monde, ainsi que l'habitat essentiel de 54 espèces aquatiques impérables. Pour la plupart migratoires inscrites sur la liste fédérale. Au Canada, bon nombre de nos poissons d'eau douce se déplacent entre des zones d'habitat qui s'assoient sur une centaine de mètres ou des centaines de kilomètres pour satisfaire leurs besoins vitaux.
Today we are in Winnipeg, Manitoba at the Freshwater Institute, and with us is the Canadian Happy Fish, which is an important symbol of World Fish Migration Day. This day is important to us as it provides an opportunity to share our knowledge, expand collaborative opportunities, and spread awareness on the importance of fish-accessible migratory corridors, healthy fish habitats, and sustainably developed aquatic ecosystems. This year, Fisheries and Oceans Canada will be celebrating our love for migratory fishes and healthy aquatic habitats by hosting a virtual cycle event called Instead of Spinning Your Reels, Let's Spin Your Heels for World Fish Migration Day.
Cette activité, qui aura lieu le vendredi 23 octobre 2020, amènera les utilisateurs d'un vélo stationnaire sur une route migratoire par la rivière et les ruisseaux. Elle sera diffusée en continu sur Instagram pour toutes les personnes qui souhaitent y participer. Nous espérons que vous pourrez pédaler avec nous.
There we go. Thank you for that message from our neighbors in Canada. This is the North America World Fish Migration Day, so I'm happy that we got some representation there. I'm going to try to bring this together pretty quickly. Hopefully you can all see my screen. And just a little bit about the World Fish Migration Foundation, which developed at the first World Fish Migration Day to really spur this global movement to get people excited about their rivers, to connect them to these places, and to work on their behalf. And there's many great reports you can find on the World Fish Migration Day website. This is one of my favorites from our partners in Gabon. And you can see for this year, all around the world, fantastic events happening. You can click on any of these fish on the website, www.worldfishmigrationday.com, and see what's happening in places near you. And maybe it'll inspire you to hold an event in the future. We have more countries participating in this year than ever, 71 countries, which is pretty fantastic, reaching some new places in Africa. And World Fish Migration Foundation doesn't just do World Fish Migration Day. They produced 2 books now. The latest one is From Sea to Source 2.0, sort of a textbook of why fish need to move around and what you can do to help. The Living Planet Index, which shows this 76% decline in migratory freshwater fish around the world, an incredible compilation from all these people around the world that we're in touch with from this networking. And Dam Removal Europe and Amber are 2 projects that have really helped to restore rivers in Europe. So what can you do to help in the last couple of minutes? Get out there and inspire yourself. Get to one of these river runs in Plymouth or some river near you. See when the fish are migrating and inspire other people. You can educate yourself about the facts through many local NGO sites. You can volunteer, citizen science, documenting where these fish are, where they aren't, where there are barriers, because we don't know where all the barriers are really. And you can donate to NGOs such as the World Fish Migration Foundation, TNC, any of the other American rivers that have participated in the call. And be sure to vote. This is often a local issue when there are town-owned dams, but there's also federal and state funding that goes into fixing up our rivers, and you can help by making sure you get out and vote for issues that you care about for our rivers, and get the word out through social media. So this evening is our next webinar. It'll have some new content, new speakers, some of the same entry. If you haven't signed up, you still can. It's at 5 p.m. Eastern time this evening. Here's the lineup, which includes an amazing slideshow from Keith Ellenbogen, as well as some great global perspectives and new work that you'll see around Town Brook in the town of Plymouth. So it's not just what's happening today for our North America event, but on World Fish Migration Day, which actually starts Friday evening, 3:40 Eastern time again, is when things kick off in New Zealand, and their events and almost hourly around the world as we go towards the end which is in North America, sorry, I didn't get the time right. It's between 4 and 5:30 from North America. So that's it for just a little bit more about the World Fish Migration Foundation, what's happening for World Fish Migration Day. And Nicole, I think, has a video to close us out with from the Eurofishing contest. Cool.
Yep, I will.
There we go. Great. This is a contest that brought in people from all over the world, actually, not just Europe, to produce songs about rivers and fish migration. And there's incredible works from school children to adults, crooners to old timers, putting together songs and videos around fish migration. And here's one of the videos now.
Dream of returning to the islands where we're going, only love knows. Made it to 80, I'm silky and long. One thing I'm gonna get into. I wanna be terminal breathing. Damned if I do, damned if I don't. I wanna be broadcast sporting. Damned if I do, damned if I don't. Damn deals. Made it halfway, I can smell the seafood to bursting, set me free. Banging our heads on the big grey wall, I wish I was your lover. Damn. I wanna be terminal breathing. Damned if I do, damned if I don't. I wanna be broadcast sporting. Damned if I do, damned if I don't. Damn deals. Damn Stop eating. Stomach zones. Sex. Stop eating. Stomach zones. Stop eating. Stomach zones. Sex. Stop eating. Sex. Stop eating. Stop eating. Stomach zones. Sex. Stop eating. Stomach zones.
Wow. Well, there's a great send off for our first of our 2 North America World Fish Migration Day events. If you'd like, there are a lot more videos online. You can go to the World Fish Migration Day website and scroll down and you'll see the Eurofishing competition. You can click, look at the winners, look at some of the others along the way. There's some truly inspiring, fun videos that people have made and songs that they made up to celebrate their rivers, to celebrate the return of fish. So again, it's through celebration, some happiness in our somewhat crazy lives these days that I think, as Bob said, we can really find hope and we can really work together to restore rivers and the fish that occur there and all the wildlife around it and people that, that benefit from that. So with that, it is just about the bottom of the hour. I think Nicole might be willing to hang on a little bit later and show another video. I think, is that something you'd like to play another video? Is that what I saw in the chat?
I could play another Eurofishing video if you guys want.
I think that'd be great. I
Yeah,
will
do that.
Let's do it.
Sign off, people. Click off if you need to, but it's been wonderful. I want to thank everyone who organized this and the people in the background. Nicole, Molly Payne Wynn, who was looking at the questions. I'd like to thank Meg again and the committee. But thank you all for participating and learning a little bit more about fish migration and World Fish Migration Day. Hope we'll see a lot of you this afternoon. Thank you. And hit it, Nicole.
When I migrate, yeah, I know I'm gonna be the fish that migrates next to you. When I swim up, yeah, I know I'm gonna be the fish that swims along with you. When I get caught, yes, I know I'm gonna be the fish that gets caught next to you. And if the river, yes, the river route is cut, I'm gonna be the fish that's dying without you. But I would swim 500 miles and I would swim 500 more just to be the fish that swims 1,000 miles to spawn down on the floor.
And that's it, everyone. Thank you so much for participating. And again, we'll see all those who can join us at 5 o'clock this evening. So long.